The African context of use, and I'm going in order here, temporally. I'm supposed to begin with the African context of use. But again, as I say, the native context of use in terms of addiction, in terms of why most of us are here today, really begins in the 60s with Howard and in the 80s with the expansions of Ibogaine's use into social networks of drug users in the US and in the Netherlands. But there is, of course, an African context of use, a sacred culture around Ibogaine that existed for centuries and possibly for millennia among the Pygmies around the use of Ibogaine. Ibogaine is not used for addiction commonly in Africa. However, it has been used for medical purposes. Ibogaine was used, for example, as for some somatic conditions, particularly for infertility, which in the colonial era was often related to venereal disease. And there's so basically a nexus between politics and health in this case. The Ibogaine subculture, the Ibogaine culture, religious culture in Africa, gained prominence as a psychological context of resistance to the colonial presence. The Ibogaine and its sacred use represented a domain of dignity to a population that was being humiliated and exploited. As I said, it is the use to treat addiction, which is the focus here, is not a focus of the traditional African Bwiti context. Some evidence associates iboga alkaloids with effects on cell-mediated immunity and antimicrobial activity. And this may not be interesting from an infectious disease standpoint. It might not. But certainly from an evolutionary standpoint, it's very interesting because, again, this is another biological domain, immunity, and the brain, where Ibogaine is interacting. And again, these are diverse information processing systems in which Ibogaine is interacting, and again, this is the evidence that Ibogaine is interacting with some kind of characteristic motif that is widely distributed throughout functional proteins in the body. These cell-mediated immunity or antimicrobial effects include activity against Candida in the intact animal, the mouse, reversal of multi-drug resistance in vitro in human cancer cells, activity against the tuberculosis bacteria, human immunodeficiency, HIV, and 18-methoxycoronardine. And this is one use that may have practical significance, is its use for leishmaniasis. Again, these may or may not be important, but they illustrate a very interesting, wide biological spectrum of activity. This is a Bwiti chapel in Gabon, a temple of Ibogaine's, the setting of Ibogaine's use. Ibogaine is taken typically in large doses in an initiatory ceremony that's usually done once in a person's life. Mirrors. Mirrors as a metaphor of personal transformation, and I think this is where the nexus of religion and psychology and addiction meet. Addiction, the transformation, the recovery from addiction is a metaphor, is a instance of personal transformation. Mirrors are used extensively in Bwiti. This is not an accidental image. This is not something that was captured casually at one moment during an Ibogaine ceremony. There is a lot of images of mirrors in the Ibogaine, in the Iboga ceremony. Here we have a mirror. And here we have another mirror. And here we have another mirror. So this motif keeps reappearing. And the image of oneself in the mirror is very important in terms of the interpretation, the subjective experience of the Ibogaine initiation.